Okay, good morning, everyone. As ever, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This should be a really good one. I'm Fitch from Glopal, and today I'm joined by Rikki Chan from Fairtex. She's head of e-commerce at one of the most recognizable names in combat sports. Today, we're going to talk about how they went from a largely English language online presence to actively selling and marketing in over 20 markets around the world. We'll talk about what led them to make that move, what it looks like in practice, and what the early results they're already seeing. Before we jump in, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. We'll try to keep this to around 30 minutes. We'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll save about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat as we go, and Carl will collate those, and then he'll come back into the call, and we can go through them directly with Rikki. And if you have to jump off the call at any point, we're going to record this, so feel free to leave, and then we'll send you the recording afterwards. Okay, so let's get into it quickly then. Rikki, I'll say goodbye to Carl. I'll let Carl go, and then we can get into it. Yes, Carl. All right, yeah. So before we get into it and dive into the collaboration with Glopal and Fairtex, I think what would be great is if you could introduce yourself, give us a bit of background on your career, where you came from, how you got into e-commerce and international growth, and more particularly how you got into combat sports.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career back in 2005 when I started in marketing qualitative strategy and analysis. And so I was basically working with brands, learning and developing their strategies, and answering questions with their audiences, learning how they worked and grew. Some of the brands I worked with were Samsung. I worked with their first smartphone product, Visa, MasterCard, Taco Bell. I did this across the US in LA, San Francisco, New York, Texas, before making the move to Europe and working for Booking.com as a data scientist, collecting data, creating strategies, implementing them across the Benelux market. So my experience spanned from the US to the European market. And when I came into Fairtex and in combat sports, it was really to grow their online presence, help and create more of an international awareness. And with my background in international, working with international companies, it was a good fit. So that's how I came.
Okay, cool. So how long have you been with Fairtex then?
I've been with Fairtex now for almost 2.5 years.
Okay, cool. So from what I understand, Fairtex is basically like the super famous within the combat sports space. But for those people that aren't familiar with that space and might be hearing Fairtex for the first time, it would be great if you could maybe walk us through their history as a brand, where they came from, how it started, where they stand today, and kind of what their big priorities are for the brand right now.
Absolutely. So Fairtex began in 1971, but not as a combat sports brand. It was more of a manufacturer textile company. The owner and founder, Philip Wong, he has a passion for Muay Thai. It's something he grew up loving doing, and it was always something that he wanted to bring to the world and bring to the international stage. As the years went on, he began to see that it was becoming quite popular. And when it came to making his own equipment, he tried to outsource, but then he thought he could make it himself. And there began the equipment side of Fairtex equipment. From there, he then launched a training facility in Pattaya in Bangkok, in Thailand, and started training fighters. And that's really where he still did the manufacturing, but more moved into Muay Thai. When he was approached by One Championship, Chatri approached him to sponsor. This is where Fairtex really became known and exploded onto the global stage. And all of a sudden became one of the top names, if not the top name, for Muay Thai. So since then, we've now branched into all the combat sports, MMA, Jiu-Jitsu, as well as Muay Thai, kickboxing. And we are known as really the OG of combat sports since we have been around since 1971. And we just recently, last week, celebrated our 55th year anniversary.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised to realize they've gone back that far, because they do feel like a hugely contemporary brand. I mean, I've only become aware of them in the last few years with the MMA and stuff. Okay, so before we dig into the collaboration between Fairtex and Glopal, and where you are today, it would be really good if you could perhaps cast your mind back to before you started working with Glopal. What did I know it wasn't actually that long ago, but what did your setup look like? What markets were you in? How localized were you? What did your e-commerce infrastructure and platform look like? And what were the kind of restrictions and frustrations that you had with that setup?
So when I was brought aboard, it was really to modernize, the e-commerce platform. And one of the things was, of course, changing everything about it. We switched from Magento to Shopify, to try and have a better UX. We really changed the way that the products were sold. Before e-commerce, it was very much distributor based, which worked. However, as the needs of shoppers and buyers around the world changed, especially within the COVID years, it became crucial to really reach out to all these audiences. So the website was kind of very last on the list for Fairtex. And so there was a lot of restructuring of the entire platform and recognizing not only how the buyers shop, but what they wanted to see, the layouts. And so we started just simply, going just one site globally, one site for the Thai audience, and, started building it up. One of the main issues that we had in the beginning was reaching all these audiences, because of course, not every audience audience member speaks English, but as that is the international language that we could use to come across to them, we decided, to start there. But we know we were losing a lot of audience in various regions because we couldn't speak to them correctly. We tried many different language apps. We tried the many plugins that Shopify offered, but there was a lot of restrictions that were had. Lots of things were incorrectly translated. Some things weren't translated at all. So we were really missing out on a huge audience. And then that's when entered Glopal, which really changed everything for us.
Okay, and so how did that first come about? When were you first introduced to Glopal? What's the kind of the background there?
Well, we were introduced to Glopal. I was approached by Carl, and actually he brought this to attention because I had expressed concern about how we were trying to reach these audiences, but we were restricted. And so Carl brought to my attention Glopal and how it could translate. Not only just the website and the text, but also any of the blogs, also Google Ads. It really went above and beyond just translating the basics within the website. So
Well, so yeah, I think now might be a good time. So for those people because we get lots of different people that dial into these webinars, many of which aren't really familiar with us as a business. And I wonder at this point, it might be sort of slightly more interesting and perhaps more powerful to hear from you, kind of exactly what it is that Glopal does do for you. It does do for Fairtex in practice, in really practical terms, and then kind of what that feels like on your end to manage that global business.
Within our EU market, so we ended up launching a third website into Europe. And within this market in Europe, of course, we have multiple countries all speaking different languages. While there are some countries, of course, like the Netherlands, that they can understand English and speak English, we still could speak with them. However, in countries where English isn't predominantly a language, this is where it was really helping out. So in all of these countries, we were able to gain new audience. In Spain, Italy, even in the Arabic language, that was a huge market for us. That we knew we had an audience there, but we needed the website translated. Even into South Korea, Japan, where the characters, those are very difficult, and it was time consuming, of course, to do it one by one. We even had a website that was in Japanese, but we couldn't manage it at the same rate as we could our others. So this is where Glopal became an instrument that changed the game for us, because it absolutely was able to reach these audiences, and we were able to see these transitions in real time. So everything was translated down to the blogs. So not only the titles, the web descriptions, the nav bar, but the blogs, the Google ads. So this extended so that now we could reach those audiences who were once we were unable to reach because it was in English and they couldn't understand it. So that's really where it became.
Okay, so you've now got 20 foreign language versions of the Fairtex site. On the back end, how does that look for you managing that? Because that sounds like it could be quite a big task to manage all the orders and everything from 20.
It is. I mean, we have multiple ways doing it, but we're seeing it on the back end. When we see like where new customers are coming from every day, it's a new country that pops up, and we're like, wow, we didn't realize we had such an audience there. For us, of course, everything's meant when it's on the back end. This is where Glopal does a great job to really fine tune these pieces that with the exact translation. And we went over this, certain words that shouldn't be translated, ways to translate it. And we're able to, in the back end, adapt these and make sure that everything is in sync so that we don't miss anything. Or if there's something that we say, do not translate, it doesn't translate unless it specifically has a different meaning. For instance, like in China, when we translate certain things, because of course it makes more sense for the Chinese audience. So we're able to control that for all the websites that we have translated, or for the website, the languages we have translated.
And I suppose just for to exact it in terms of processing those orders, that's all done through your existing original Shopify.
Yeah, it's still done through Shopify. That in Europe, all of our orders go through our European warehouse. Everything's processed the same. It doesn't affect the processing. Our warehouse is located in the Netherlands. Our warehouse staff is Dutch. They have no problems to process the orders. It doesn't affect anything. In fact, we're busier than we have been, so I think it's working out well.
Okay, great. So I guess that leads me on nicely then, because you've actually only been live with us for, I guess, just over a month now, which in terms of your overall international journey is still very much early days. And certainly what we tend to see as a company is that when we're working with brands, particularly on the organic side, it can take a little bit of time for things to warm up. But as I understand it, you're already starting to see some pretty strong early signs of growth. So I'd be really interested to hear a little bit about exactly where you're seeing that growth and how it's manifesting itself.
Absolutely. One of our largest markets was Spain, but it was really difficult to have that audience. We have seen a real increase in Spain as well as in Poland, in markets that we thought weren't even reachable for us. We tried every strategy, but it was literally just the translation that needed to be done in order for them to come to the site. We see that we're gaining audiences that we never thought we would, even in the Eastern European countries. We now have, the chats when they're coming to chat and talk to customer service. Of course, it's in their language, and of course, that's okay. We translate it on our end. But, this really shows us that we were missing out on these crucial markets. So for us, it was something that, enabled us to reach them without having to re-strategize completely, like a new marketing plan or anything, but just by speaking to them in their language.
Mm-hmm. So I'd be interested, because you're operating a distributor model before. Do the markets that you're now seeing new growth in, does that correlate to where you would traditionally see growth, or is this just completely an unexpected set of growth results?
It's new growth. The growth is new. I will say France has always been our number one in Europe, with Germany very close behind. Since Glopal, we've seen Germany definitely take the lead, which has been amazing. And since then, we've signed a network in Germany through this new gym. So that has really allowed us to work with them more. But we have seen, like I said earlier, growth in Poland, where we knew there was a market there. We were told there was a market there. We saw our abandoned carts have really decreased since we've had Glopal, and we have seen more people coming in from these countries all over that we never thought we would see before.
Yeah, having lived in Poland for 4 or 5 years, it doesn't entirely surprise me that combat sports is quite popular there.
Which is, but nobody before. So it was like, wow, okay. It was just the language.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people really like about taking this approach, where you, rather than take doing lots of research up front and deciding on a few key markets to invest in. You basically go really, really broad, and then you just see what the market tells you, and it quite often throws up a lot of surprises. And then once you see those surprises, you can double down and invest further in marketing and really get traction in those markets. So in terms of the collaboration between Fairtex and Glopal, obviously it's still, we're still very much in an early chapter of this particular story, and we've got a lot more work to do with you going forward. But before we get to the Q&A, what would be great is if we could finish up by looking to the future for Fairtex. What are the immediate ambitions in terms of continued international expansion? Where does that fit within the broader ambitions of Fairtex? What are the big priorities for 2026, 2027? I've heard a few bits of news recently from your camp. I think there was an e-commerce award you won recently, which would be interesting to hear about. And I think there's also quite an exciting film that you're involved with too. So perhaps you could give us a bit more insight into the future for Fairtex.
Also, it's very exciting. We have a lot of plans for this year, really expanding across Europe. We had our warehouse, we just opened it, really got it going last July, and with that has just become exponential, and we want to expand across all of Europe. We have just signed a network a gym network with 20 gyms, one network in Germany. We just started sponsoring another fight organization called Infusion, as well as Glory out of the Netherlands. We're working with multiple gyms in France now, sponsoring them. So we're growing very quickly and very fast. We did just win an award for our e-commerce in Thailand called the Martech Awards, which shows that we've enabled AI using technology to really, conquer, as we like to say on our team. And yes, we do have we're going to be featured in a movie coming out in April 10th with Russell Crowe called Beast. And you'll see Fairtex in the movie and proudly displayed. So that'll be an exciting. And we have many wonderful collaborations this year. There's a very exciting one that will happen in November, but it's top secret for now. So everybody has to go to the website in November to find out about it. So, we're definitely moving upwards and onwards, and we're excited to see how far we go.
Okay, cool. Well, maybe we'll have you back in November to tell us about that.
Absolutely.
It certainly sounds like Fairtex is fairly unstoppable right now, and probably a pretty fun place to work at the moment, I should think. And it's also a very good example of a brand that's using the right tools to operate on an absolutely global scale. So right now I will bring Carl back, and let's see if we've got some questions. Carl.
Awesome. Love the story. Have a couple of questions here. Maybe I'll combine some of them that are similar. So there's two questions here from Michael L. Hey, I have a question, please. What is the most common mistake you see brands make when they start international expansion? So I combined the mistake and also what's a common thing you've seen as well as common success in some of the top markets. So those I just combined mistake and common success.
I would say, jumping too quickly ahead. We have had to do it slowly, step by step. And we know where we want to be, and we know our end goal. And it's just, the steps that we need to take to get there and to really create a very stable foundation. We know that of course we want to expand, and everybody right now knows us for Muay Thai. So now that we've solidified that bottom ground, now we're building those steps. We're trying to enhance our audience, reach out to more brand awareness. And I think the biggest mistake I've seen with some brands in the past is that they don't understand their audience, and they kind of create for them what they think their audience wants instead of listening to their audience. And so we actually have on our European website, we have a questionnaire that specifically asks our audience all these questions and what they want. And this has given us great insight into allowing us to create the products they want, reaching the target, the different regions, and really seeing where they're coming from so that we can create for them and not just what we think they want or for us.
It's very illuminating in my head, at least. There's a question from Alexander Brown. Love the brand. what's the most surprising country you've seen pop in since you've translated your site in so many languages?
Well, actually, we have all over the place. I mean, the other day there was somebody from Macedonia that reached out to us. We didn't even realize we had audience in Macedonia. But surprisingly, we have seen a lot more increase in South Korea, where when we did initial research, there was not a huge amount of audience there. There weren't a lot of searches. The SEO was quite low, but we see a lot more people visiting the website in South Korea, which we didn't realize. South America, we are getting a lot of traffic from South America. Unfortunately, shipping kind of is an issue for us there, but that being said, we know now, okay, where we want to more expansion plans and warehouse locations and logistics. So it shows us like, okay, where we need to go and grow. So yeah.
Interesting.
Sounds like the future is bright.
South Korea and I was going to say South Korea and Japan are ones which is a really, really common surprise one. So many of our brands have never seen anything at all. The minute they get something into local language, it just takes off there. And so if you haven't got local language in those markets, you're invisible basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, wow, there's a flood of questions. I just want to make sure I combine some of these things. From Emma Carey, from the early data you got, which markets seem the most promising? We're a sport brand too.
Which ones seem the most promising? Well, like I said, France was always one of our top targeted countries that we wanted to really go after. We are in very big competition with another brand there, but since we actually have now the Glopal and the correct translation, the increase in France is just huge. Before, they had to go to the top corner, click and select the language, but now that it's just translating, it's been amazing. And Finland also as well. We have a lot more coming in from Finland, which is really nice because I can't read it or understand it, but I'm glad that, they're there and that they, they're finding it. So I think that's wonderful.
Cool. There's a question from Jonathan around the ads. I used to hire a German, a French, and a Spanish speaker to run ads. How has Glopal helped you with running those ads?
Well, that's exactly what we were doing before as well. We were hiring somebody that could speak the languages, and then we were limited to where we could actually, have these certain ads. So now with Glopal, it's translating the ads on the back end into the local languages. So it has helped immensely because no longer do we have to hire or find multiple people to speak the languages to make sure everything's correct. Glopal does that for us. So now we can reach more audience and use our marketing dollars more carefully and wisely, and then re-strategize as needed. So it does it on the back end, and when they see it on their Google shopping feed, it speaks to them.
Very encouraging. We have a question from Belen. Maybe you and I can answer as well, Rikki. Hey, kindly confirm how much time my developers need to invest to localize our websites with your service. From our side, from the Glopal side, because it's Shopify a plugin, it's usually 4 to 6 weeks is our official response, but some brands have gone live in 2 to 3 weeks. But curious to know from the Fairtex side, like what was your experience? I think you were, what was it, like peak time? So you're busy with trading as well, right?
It was, I have to say, it really depends. It can go quite fast. Glopal is on top of it. They create the entire sheet. They show you what needs to be done. For us, it was really on us to how fast it would move. We needed to be on top of things. And of course, we kind of put it into play during holiday period, which for e-commerce, as we all know, isn't the best time to it's so busy. But even with that being said, we still went live within, I think, 6 weeks. So it really, as long as the team is on top of it and getting everything done and taking the meetings, and we had great support from Glopal, every step of the way and everything, everybody was answering the questions. So it was really, really quite simple. And it was clear. It was very clear. They showed us what was done, what needed to be done. and they gave us very good timelines. So, yeah.
There's a follow-up question again from Jonathan. Speaking of Latin America, can you share a bit more about like how you plan to conquer it? In your words, conquer it.
Well, I mean, for us, what we would ideally do is open a warehouse, down in somewhere in South America. I've been meeting because we use 3PLs. So finding a company that can help us with that. Currently, we have our Europe warehouse, which is doing very, very well. And so once we stabilize that, then we have plans to expand another warehouse into the US, as well as down into South America, to help, of course, with the shipping and logistics. And it's just really about finding the right partnering companies that can do that for you. And of course, since we have our own factories, we manufacture all of our own products in Thailand. It's also, we don't outsource. So we do everything here on our own. And because of that, we also have a huge demand for products, but we also have to be able to make them. And so we're trying to keep up with the demand. Good problem to have, but we have to be able to fulfill these orders.
Fascinating. Amazing story. Yeah, we can't wait to maybe have you again in the next few months, see how your story unfolded in Latin America and beyond. So I think those are all the questions we had, almost on time anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good note to end on as well. So Rikki, once again, thank you ever so much for taking the time to do this. I know you're super busy. It's been a really good conversation, and I think a lot of people watching will be taking notes. For anyone who'd like to learn more about what Glopal does, you can find us at glopal.com. And if you'd like to learn more about Fairtex, head over to fairtex.com. We'll send you the recording and a few follow-up resources to everyone that registered. And thanks again for taking the time to join us. We'll see you. Oh, actually, one last one, actually. Carl, have we got another webinar in the diary? Or is that not
confirmed? We have like 3. We're just figuring out like which ones are coming up next. So
all right. So that's also top secret.
There's one sometime late April. So we'll stay tuned, guys.
Okay. All right. See you on the next one. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.